So one of our new community ministers said in class on Friday, our opening session, by way of introduction, the following: I am overly concerned about the environment. And I just couldn't help myself. I had to say, how can you be overly concerned about the environment? How do you do that? Do you obsess about it? Do you think about it all the time? Do you imagine an end time when you won't have to think about it anymore? And obviously I was making a kind of a bad joke to this person's honest reflection of self. And then I thought about this text again that we have for today. I'm betting that the Jews in the wilderness were obsessed about the environment too. Like, where was the food going to come from? And what about the air conditioning in the tents? And then it turns out that the text, kind of mid-wilderness, mid-Exodus, really argues that God has a habit of providing enough right at the time when you think, oh, it's probably not going to happen. There it is, breakfast time, and there is the food you need. Nourishment for the people like all of us who just want to know, where is it all going to end? How will it conclude itself, this great thing called creation, this magnificent thing called the cosmos? Where is it going to end? And it sounds like it doesn't end, but instead means a daily hunt for manna. And if you find a daily hunt for manna as part of your habit in life, maybe everything will be okay. Because maybe that eternal now is the okay, and is what's really not just happening right this minute, but is the end game as well. I have a really good friend who says that she's going to rewire and not retire. And she's got a whole long environmental argument, but it goes like this, that she's going to connect to renewable sources of energy spiritually and disconnect from non-renewable sources of energy. And I keep thinking, how is she going to do that? How is she going to read the book at night? Or how is she going to go to the yoga class? But she insists that she's got a plan. And I am in a bit of a quarrel with her about her end game, because I see what her motive is. Her motive is to score a 10 on the dismount. And I'm wondering if that's really a good idea. I wonder if that's just not another version of obsession with the end game, like being overly concerned with the environment. Or, as the Israelites did in the wilderness, you know, they not only picked up their bread and bird in the morning, they also complained about how they didn't have any onion or garlic to go with it. Because back in the good old days in Egypt, you had a little taste instead of this reliability of God. So I'm in a quarrel with my friend because I don't think sustainability is about an end game. I think sustainability is a process, not a binary between now and then, but it's a process. Solar and wind are going to probably happen, but not tomorrow. So there are going to be compromises between here and there, and potentially there are compromises for her spiritually between here and there. And that's what I mean by process. I want her to be more of a spiritual realist and less making a flip from, I used to be this person only concerned with the material, and now I'm a person only concerned with the spiritual. Do you see the difference? There's a kind of flip that she's doing. She's flipping from excessive materiality to excessive spirituality. It takes both to tango, both spiritual and reality. So I'm going to make a claim for spiritual realists today that has to do with being less utopian about our futures and less concerned about when we get out of the wilderness and more alive in the wilderness. This would mean multi-sourcing our power sources, using electricity and performance sometimes, and solar and freedom other times. And these body-soul unities are at the heart of Christianity. That's who Jesus is. That was God's idea of a great thing to do for us, is to have an ideal human, a fully material person, and a fully divine person, all in one who lived fully in the present, as though the fullness of the present was the picture that God had in mind as the end game. So here at Judson, we brag, I hope not too much, about the halo effect. We did get some of the best numbers in this study that was done about us that anybody else has. We really believe that what we do spiritually shows up in the materiality of our everyday. And I want to insist that we did not get those great numbers by getting someplace all at once and sitting there on our great numbers. We got there day by day, daily by daily, turning the building inside out and upside down and sweeping, 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 and dusting, 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 and setting up the chairs and taking the chairs down and doing that daily. That's how the halo effect came, because that's our theology of doing material things with spirit. So, I want to offer some kind of an alternative to my friend's obsession with the end game, but I've got to do a little bit more about how the end game is less important than we think. And I'm going to try to title this part, Manna Me. Just manna me. It's got a real habitual ring, and what I think can happen is that we can be mannaed daily, but we can't end ever, even at death. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just do a little bit of psychobabble to go with the slogan, Manna Me. When we worry too much about the big things or the end game, the things we can't control, we insult God's providence. When we worry too much about the end time, we insult God's providence. Providence is such a great word, and not just a word for a terrific city in Rhode Island. Providence is the way God has God's arms around us. And we don't even know it because God's touch is so light. It is not a heavy touch. Providence is the way God is with us even in the deep wilderness. Deep state, maybe that too. You know the deep wilderness, don't you? It's the place where you don't know your way out, and you don't know if you're gonna get out, and you know that the keys are missing, and you can't find your cell phone, and you're really not that sure about the people in the other tent, and you'd like a little garlic and a little onion. Back in the good old days of Egypt, when at least you were a slave and you knew what was going on. The Israelites, when they were wandering in the wilderness, did not know if it was ever going to end. They had no idea if it was ever going to end. And that really is the stuff of despair. And yet what happened is they got fed providentially every day. And some of them got out to tell the story. So the wilderness is often enhanced by worry. What's worry? Worry is wasted and unproductive work. It doesn't change things, and it keeps us from realizing the manna. We get to eat it, but we don't realize it, that something is going to happen that will rival the deep wilderness inside us. We often don't even know what it is. So I was at a training at NYU at the Spiritual Life Center where we got matched up with people different than us. I know I talk about this all the time. 78 chaplains of 78 different faiths come together every month and talk to each other. And at our orientation this year, I got matched with an Orthodox rabbi. And we were to ask each other questions that might be on the edge. Just ask some question. And so the rabbi said to me, all right, I want to know what you have to do to be a Christian. I said, I said, there's really nothing you have to do to be a Christian as I see it. And he said, well, that's awful. And then you get to trade the question back. I said, well, what do you have to do to be a Jew? Well, you have to pray every day, these prayers on a rotating cycle. You have to, and he went on with about 11 or 12 things that you had to do. And I said, well, what would happen if you didn't do them? And he said, that is completely unthinkable. Unthinkable. Because if I did not do them, I would not be a Jew. And that is unthinkable to me. And so then he says to me, so what is unthinkable to you about being a Christian? And I said, well, you have no idea the amount of privilege Christians have. You have no idea. We don't have to do anything that I know of. I mean, there are versions of Christians who think you do, but not my version. I don't even know that I have to be a Christian. I don't even know that I have to do anything. But by the power of what I know about God and the bread and the birds in the wilderness, I want to do everything. I want to do everything. So I was pretty upset by this conversation, if you want to know the truth, because I wanted to give him an answer. I wanted to say, you have to pray, or you have to not worry, or you have to trust in God's providence, or you can't insult God by walking around worrying when God has gifts for you all over the place. I wanted to say those kind of things, but I couldn't say them as have-tos. I wouldn't know how to say them as have-tos. I would know how to say them as want to. I want to respond to the incredible miracle of being alive by being someone worthy of God's providence. And I'm not even worried that I'm not worried about God's providence, so I don't pay off God with spiritual practices. So, I think that as we become more concerned about the state of the union, the state of the world, it might help us to choose more spiritual practices. You'll see where I'm going. To ritualize our time, to insult God's providence less. And I want to name a few, but I want to tell the story of Jean. So I talked with Jean Monterville yesterday for a nice long time. It was so wonderful. And Jean is a member of the congregation who was deported on January 16th. He has children here, and many of you know him very well. So Jean was in a great mood yesterday, which is unusual because he has been through terrific depression since he got to Haiti. Why was he in a good mood? Because he had enough money in the bank to make 2 weeks' payroll in the new restaurant that he'd opened, employing 11 people, going to 2 shifts in a month if things continue that well. And I just couldn't stop saying, Jean, wow, you did that since January 16th? Not to mention that you wasted most of the time being really depressed. And Just kidding. But can you imagine? And it was small gifts and large gifts from many people in this room that behaved as manna for Jean, so that Jean could behave as manna in Haiti and have 2 weeks payroll. Now, I know a lot of small business people, and if they only had 2 weeks payroll, they'd be worried, right? They'd be worried. If we only had 2 weeks payroll here at Judson, I'd be worried. But Jean feels that that is so full compared to where he was. And it's releasing him from the end game into the now game, into the here and now game. Maybe some of you watched the tennis last night. Oh, and it was starting to sound like the Israelites in the wilderness. That's great. That's great. Well, that was just really something, wasn't it? For those of you who didn't watch it, Serena Williams, age 37, lost to Osaka. What was her first name? Rachel? Naomi Osaka, age 21, and 20, thank you, in two sets. It was painful because Serena is a phenomenal tennis player and she wasn't playing that well, or Naomi was playing so well that the balance was clear. And then there was a problem with the rules. I'm not going to go into it because I don't understand tennis rules that well. But it got really, really aggravated. And Serena broke her racket, and she was penalized a game. And she kept saying, this is sexist. And by the way, what's the definition of sexism? Just in case. It's when women get treated differently than men, right? It's one definition. Well, she was told that she was taking coaching from her coach in the audience, and apparently she wasn't. She swears she wasn't. There's pretty good evidence that she wasn't. And yet, the umpire said that she was, and she got very insulted and really lost her cool. She got mad, as Rose just said. She just got mad. And, you know, getting mad in front of a gazillion people is really, it's even better than just getting mad at home in your own kitchen. You know, you can really get your fire up that way. But then for her to be able, so the end game was she lost. That's what happened in this really important game. But then she came back. She came back and congratulated her opponent, was very gracious, and one performance after another. And I thought, that's the role of a true champion wilderness dweller, somebody who really knows what it's like to be out there and not knowing what's going to happen next. Not knowing if you're going to win, score a 10 on your dismount, get out, be safe, get to eat, be respected, but to be able to come back. Come back the next morning and start looking around for God's providence. So, rituals are different when you're in a moment of great passion and excitement, like Gene is. You know, he just had to open that store every morning and make the soup, and he's selling out the food. Serena had to practice all that time, so she knew how to be somebody who could both be furious, like so many of us are at so much out there, and also come back and be human. But how do you get practice enough to do that? It seems to me that prayer is the answer. a kind of prayer which is practicing the presence of God in all moments, is being alive to the possibility that I don't see God here right now. I just broke my tennis racket in front of 3 million people, but I don't see God right here, but being practiced enough to come back and say, now I see God. So don't tell the rabbi that I said that I really agree that we need more practices. You might really wonder if the death of so much of Christianity is directly related to the loss of practices and markers and self-definitions and rituals, and that we need more of them. But don't worry, Judsonites, I'm not going to say you have to do anything, but at least check out the desert in the morning. Amen.